This changes everything. How MPIT rewrote the map of narcissistic abuse and survivor collapse. There is a moment in every survivor's journey when the mind finally asks, what happened to me? Not what did they do? Not why did I stay? But something deeper, something existential, something that feels like the question behind all questions. What happened to me? The world of narcissistic abuse has no shortage of answers. There are books and videos and therapists who will tell you it was gaslighting, that you had poor boundaries, that you were codependent, that you must go no contact and start again. And in some ways, all of that is true, but none of it explains why you collapsed. None of it explains the thing that broke you. None of it touches the hidden structure that still lives inside your nervous system, repeating, looping, reanimating itself long after the narcissist has gone. This is where MPIT begins. This is where mirrored psychic inversion theory does something that has not yet been done. It maps the internal mechanics of collapse, not just what the narcissist does, but what structurally happens to you, within you, because of them. And it does so in full partnership with the groundbreaking work of Professor Sam Vaknin, whose lifetime study of narcissistic pathology gave us the architecture of the narcissist's inner world, the shared fantasy, the cold empathy, the internal object theatre. MPIT builds on that work and it truly changes the way we understand everything. We were never in a relationship, we were in a simulation of one. Let's start here. A narcissistic relationship is not a relationship at all. It is a simulated theatre of attachment, an echo loop inside the object world of another. You weren't loved, you were mirrored, you weren't held, you were used to scaffold a fantasy. You weren't seen, you were scanned, performed, and captured. What felt like love was libidinal capture. The narcissist saw in you the potential to mirror their frozen ideal. Not love, not connection, simulation. A cold empathy scan masquerading as intimacy. In input terms, you weren't relating, you were being inverted. You were being drawn into the mirrored psychic architecture of a collapsed infantile self, a structure so damaged that it can only survive by converting others into internalized objects. You became a self object, held in place by the narcissist's introjects and bound to a collapsing ecosystem. This is not a metaphor, it is a psychic structure, and when the fantasy ends, it collapses, and so do you. How I found it: reverse engineering the narcissist collapse. Input wasn't invented in a lab, it was built out of my own collapse, piece by piece, as I tried to understand what had happened to me. And what I found was this: in order to survive a narcissist, I had to become a mirror image of one, not in behavior, not in malice, but in structure. Like the narcissist, I had internalized an impossible object. Like the narcissist, I had built a false self to survive. Like the narcissist, I had placed that false self between me and the annihilatory pain of early relational trauma. But my version was inverted. Where their false self was grandiose, mine was shameful. Where theirs was entitled, mine was self sacrificing. Where theirs sought domination, mine sought approval. Where theirs was cold empathy, mine was performed attunement. And at the heart of both, an absence. This is where MPIT departs from every other model. It sees narcissistic abuse not just as trauma, but as a system of mirrored psychic inversion, where the survivor's collapse is not a byproduct of abuse, but a structural consequence of entering the shared fantasy of a disassociated, split off self. The discovery, ASR3 and the shadow reflex. The key to MPIT is a mechanism I call ASR3, the anticipatory shadow reflex. It is not instinct, it is not your gut, it is a trauma bonded internal reflex built on pattern recognition, introject co-option, and emotional survival. It forms when you avoid the self in favor of another's object world, when you abandon your own internal map in order to stay attached to a collapsing system, and it feels like the only way to survive. But the cost is immense. ASR3 loops, ASR3 obeys, ASR3 performs intimacy while avoiding the annihilatory truth underneath that you are no longer living as yourself. You are living as a mirror of a mirror, surviving their absence by collapsing into yours. This reflex explains why survivors collapse after discard. It explains why they feel as if they're dying. It explains why the grief is non-linear, psychotic, and body-bound. Because it's not just grief, it's IMRA, the inverse mirrored reflexive apathy. It's CIPR, collapse-induced psychotic regression. It's the moment the self begins to disassemble, unable to metabolize what just occurred. The narcissist core, what Vaknin gave us. Professor Sam Vaknin taught us that narcissists are not inherently bad people. They are the children of annihilation. They grew up without an authentic core. The true self is sealed in an ASR1 state, a pre-verbal annihilatory panic from early maternal failure. They survive by constructing a false self and then projecting it outward, demanding that others sustain it. He gave us a language, shared fantasy, cold empathy, snapshotting, object theatre, hypercathexis, introject collapse, the dual mothership, and many, many more. MPIT takes that structure and shows what happened when you're dragged into it. It's not just manipulation, it is libidinal reanimation. You are turned into the narcissist's internal object. You are no longer being loved. You are used to simulate love. And the moment you stop supplying the fantasy, they vanish because the fantasy must be maintained at all costs, even if it means your collapse. The survivor's false self, a mirror of survival. Let's be clear, your false self did not emerge out of narcissism. It emerged out of terror. It emerged out of needing to survive annihilatory love, the kind that devours, enmeshes, seduces, and discards. You weren't trying to manipulate, you were trying to stay safe. But the architecture is the same. It mirrors theirs, only inverted. This is not pathology. This is reaction formation under symbolic collapse. It is the organizing gate moment, the point at which the psyche chooses a mask to survive the burn. And when it breaks off, what's underneath? Not a narcissist, but a mute child, a disorientated self, a body full of noise and memory. MPIT names that child, MPIT draws that map, MPIT validates that you were never sick, you were inverted. This is a declaration. Survivors deserve a new map. Let this be said finally. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are not the narcissist. You are a survivor of mirrored psychic inversion. You entered a system that converted you into an object, and you survived it by building a false self around a frozen imago, the hope of finally being loved by someone who could not love. This is not weakness, this is brilliance. This is trauma-informed survival strategy. But now it's time to break the mirror. Now it's time to reclaim authorship. MPIT exists because no one mapped this before, because what happened inside us was too complex, too symbolic, too relational to be seen by surface level models. Because we needed a theory that speaks the language of the psyche, not just the behavior, not just the symptoms, but structure. And thanks to Sam Vaknin's original architecture and the lived collapse that followed, we now have it. MPIT is not a brand, it is not a tool set, it is a map back to the self, and now it is yours. Peace out. Loads of love.